Have you ever thought about how a single company could get so powerful it ends up ruling millions of people? Well, that was the East India Company. But then, the British government decided to step in and take the reins. This is the story of that takeover, a power grab told through 4 really important laws that basically built the foundation for an empire.
So it really begs the question, who was actually running the show in India? Was it this trailblazing, profit-hungry East India Company? I mean, they had their own army, their own government. Or was it the British Crown, thousands of miles away, suddenly waking up and realizing, hey, our creation's getting a little out of control? This was the ultimate showdown for who was in charge.
All right, so this whole story really kicks off right here, the Regulating Act of 1773. This was Parliament's first real go at trying to, rein in a company that was acting less like a business and a lot more like a rogue state.
So why was this law so desperately needed? I mean, what was going on? Well, to put it simply, the company's officials in India were getting filthy rich. They were running all these side businesses, taking enormous bribes. The whole administration was just spiraling into absolute chaos. London had to do something, and fast, before the entire thing just completely fell apart.
And you've got to understand, this was a huge deal, a real landmark moment. For the very first time, the British government officially waded in to manage the company's affairs. It was basically Parliament saying, look, you guys aren't just merchants anymore. You are a political power, and from now on, we are going to regulate you.
And their strategy? It was a classic top-down takeover. First, they create this new super governor position in Bengal to centralize all the power. They made the other big territories, Bombay and Madras, report directly to him. Next, they dropped in a British Supreme Court right in Calcutta to start imposing their own legal system. And finally, they flat-out banned the private trade, the side hustles, and the bribes that were making everyone so wealthy. It was a really smart, multi-pronged attack to bring order to the chaos.
And who was the guy chosen to wield all this new power? None other than Lord Warren Hastings. Just like that, one single person became the face of British authority in India, the central gear in this brand new machine of government.
But, like any new piece of software, version 1.0 had some serious bugs. The Regulating Act had accidentally created a whole new power struggle. This forced Parliament to rush out a patch, an update, just a few years later to fix the system. So what was the main problem, the core defect? It was pretty simple, actually. Who had the final word? You had the new Governor General and the new Supreme Court locked in this constant tug of war. It was just a messy fight over who had jurisdiction, especially when the court started trying to prosecute company officials for things they did as part of their job. So this new act, it basically drew some very clear lines in the sand. First, it protected company officials from the Supreme Court for anything they did in an official capacity. Then, and this is huge, it put a big wall around tax collection, basically telling the court to stay out. And finally, it made it crystal clear that appeals from lower courts went to the Governor General, not the Supreme Court. The message couldn't have been clearer. In this power struggle, the executive branch was coming out on top. Okay, so with that internal power struggle kind of sorted out, the British government moved on to an even bigger, more fundamental change. This next act, this one would completely reshape the entire relationship between the company and the crown. The issue was this. The East India Company was essentially wearing 2 different hats at the same time. On one hand, it was a for-profit business, a commercial trader. But on the other, it was a conquering power, a tax-collecting political ruler. Pitt's India Act was specifically designed to untangle these 2 jobs once and for all. And the solution was, frankly, pretty ingenious. They created what was called a double government. They let the company's own directors keep managing the business side of things, the trade, the ships, the profits. But they created a brand new, very powerful board of control, appointed by the government back in London. And this board would now handle everything else. All the political stuff, the military, the civil administration, the whole shebang. And right here, the change in language is absolutely everything. For the very first time, these territories weren't just called the company's land anymore. No, the official term was now the British possessions in India. This wasn't just, a minor wording change. It was a powerful, unmistakable declaration of ownership by the British Crown. So yeah, this was the moment the balance of power decisively tipped. With this new board of control in place, the British government now had supreme, unquestionable authority over how the company was run in India. The era of a semi-independent corporation acting like a country, that was pretty much over. But there was one
final piece to this whole foundational puzzle. And this last part was all about concentrating power, not just in the government in general, but specifically in the hands of its top guy on the ground.
So in 1786, when the highly respected Lord Cornwallis was offered the top job of Governor General, he didn't just say yes. He came back with a counteroffer. He knew exactly how tough the job was, and he laid down two very specific conditions before he'd even consider taking it.
And his demands were incredibly bold. First, he wanted the power to overrule his own council. That way, he couldn't get stuck in endless debates or bureaucracy. Second, he wanted to also be the military commander-in-chief, combining both political and military authority into one role. And guess what? Parliament wanted him so badly, they just said, okay. They passed a special act just to grant him these unprecedented powers.
So let's just quickly recap this whole journey, right? It all starts back in 1773 with that first attempt to regulate. Then, in 81, they do a quick fix to strengthen the executive. The real game changer comes in 1784 when the British government establishes its supreme control. And finally, in 1786, they cement all that power in the hands of one person, the Governor General. You can see it, right? A clear, deliberate, step-by-step path to taking complete control.
And all of this leaves us with one last really crucial question. You see, over just 13 years, the entire mission shifted. It went from just trying to manage a chaotic company to actively building a system for direct imperial rule. With this powerful new framework firmly in place, the stage was now set for the next, much bigger chapter of the British Empire in India, a chapter that would be defined not just by regulation, but by outright rule.